it logically voids any attempt at us worshiping him. Meaningless worship. Now let's go to Acts chapter 17 for a moment, please. Acts chapter 17. Hoping and praying this makes sense to you. Sometimes things make sense to me, even if they don't make sense to others. If you have questions, I would love for you to come and talk to me about it. Acts chapter 17, verses 22 through 25. Paul is in the city of Athens, and he goes into this area of Athens where there is an idol, a god, a stone piece to honor just about any deity of any religion, of any nation, of any group in the area. And he goes through finding these things, and it's just a group of people who are willing to talk about just the latest fad religiously. And so they're actually kind of primed to hear what Paul has to say. Verse 22, Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious." Compliment, maybe. Verse 23, "For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything." You can probably follow his argument better than I can. How can you expect me to worship all these things made by human hands when I could worship this so-called unknown God who created all those things in the first place? And it's a very sound, logical, helpful argument when you think about it that way. And he's not even so much arguing it yet as he's just laying it out there in front of them. Were the people of Athens religious? Absolutely. This is a city full of idols and full of worship. Worship is going on all the time. They're very religious about that. I can be religious about a lot of things. I can religiously follow my favorite sports team, Spurs, and they can lose and all that. But, I can religiously do that. I can religiously, work on cars. I can religiously, just do about anything in my life if I give it enough energy and attention. And turn it into something of a ritual, then it becomes something religious. And so they're very religious, but there's something missing, some knowledge that they don't have. Now, they put this idol, this statue in place with this inscription, "To the unknown God." And it kind of smacks to me of the backup plan, the just in case, the provisional worship object. So out there on the golf course, right, sometimes if you're at the tee box and you want to, you hit a fairly good shot, but you just can't tell if it made it in bounds or out of bounds. It's just a little too far. You can't see where it landed. Well, sometimes you might say to your friends, "Hey, I'm going to hit a provisional." And you knock another one out there, and again, you hope that one's going to be a better shot. Just in case you can't find that ball, maybe you'll hit this one. And I'm totally butchering the actual rules there, but the idea behind it is a provisional. It's a just-in-case ball. Do you think God wants to be that? Do you think God wants to be our just-in-case we don't catch all the others, kind of God? That's not who he wants to be. And so in reality, he doesn't need us to worship him, to serve him, as though our devotion really, powers his engine or appeases his wrath. That's not really how it works. In reality, he doesn't need us to do that. He invites us to worship him if we truly love him, to serve him if we deeply appreciate what he's done for us. It's a very different set of circumstances. And the Athenians here did not yet know the one true God. Do we know him? Do we know how to worship him? Is that even important to us? Those are the questions we need to be trying to answer individually this morning. Romans. Let's go to Romans chapter 10 for just a moment, please. Romans chapter 10, verses 1 through 3. These two are kind of connected when you think about it. Romans 10, verses 1 through 3, Paul says, "Brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to God for them is that they may be saved." The them, if you go back to chapter 9 at the end there, he's talking about the Jews and versus the Gentiles. And of course, he wants all of them to be saved, but very specifically, he does want the Jews to be saved, even though they seem to sort of be cutting themselves out. So, brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to God for them is that they may be saved. For I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For being ignorant of the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. He's saying, Jews, wake up. You need to stop worrying about becoming righteous in and of yourself by completing the law, by working hard and earning your salvation, because God hands you that salvation. You're missing this knowledge. You've got zeal. The Jews were zealous. They were reverent for God. They had a level of detail to their worship and their service to God that can't be compared by any other religion, really, in a lot of ways. So they're zealous. They have an enthusiasm for God, just as Paul did, case in point. But Paul was wrong. The Jews were wrong. And so Paul's trying to clear that up for them. He says, look, I did the same thing. Christ is the righteousness. And so, in the same way that the Athenians have a sort of zeal and a religiosity about them, Paul says to the Jews, you've got zeal, but you're missing some knowledge. Know who God is. Does God give us the knowledge that's necessary for how to worship Him, to the actions and the attitudes that need to be involved? He does. He does. Let's go to John chapter 4, the passage that Gatlin read for us earlier. John chapter 4. I'm going to back up to verse 19 for just a little more context here. John chapter 4, verse 19. This is where Jesus has been talking to the woman at the well, and there's a lot of neat things about this story, a lot of stuff on evangelism we could talk about, but what I want us to focus in is that final discussion where they're talking about worship.